You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. You are a city built on a hilltop. What does it mean to be salt of the earth? What does it mean to be the light of the world? What does it mean to be that city on a hilltop? Jesus doesn't give any particular instructions in this particular piece of the scriptures we're listening to. But we must understand that it's part of the Sermon on the Mount, introduced by the Beatitudes. The full teaching given by Jesus on what it really means to be a Christian. And if you also understand that in the church, the first reading is always linked to the gospel, even if not always obviously, then we begin to see what it means to be the light of the world. Because it means that we must do those good works that Jesus talks about. What are the good works? Share your bread with the hungry. It doesn't even necessarily mean that we've got to be very aware of those people who are starving throughout the world. But we need to be aware of just how much we actually have. How we have more than possibly 70% of the rest of the world's population. And we have to ask ourselves, is that just? And is it fair? And if it isn't fair, then what should we be doing about it? It means that we're actually called to be activists in a way. We have to seek to redress inequality. We don't really like to think about these things. It's much easier just to give a few pounds to a retiring collection, or much easier simply to give to the Salvation Army, or perhaps even, if we're feeling brave, to give to a beggar in the street. We're called on to shelter the homeless poor. I don't know about you, but I'm very reluctant to invite anybody that I don't know to stay the night with me. It's open to all kinds of abuse, and in these days of safeguarding, it can be dangerous even for anybody who's taking in a stranger. But there are many organisations which do so, and we can support them. But it's not something we can ignore. It is a duty laid on us by the gospel. You've got to clothe the man you see to be naked. We don't see many of those these days around in Ribarlic, and certainly not while the weather is so cold. But that isn't what it's talking about. How poor do you have to be? In the Old Testament it says, if a man has to lend you his cloak as surety for a loan, then you mustn't even keep it overnight, because to do so would be to deprive him of his only shelter. How many people do we deprive of shelter, even without thinking about it? Then will your light shine like the dawn. If we are doing these things, if we do away with the wicked word, the clenched fist. And I've been very struck this week by watching President Trump's impeachment and his reaction to the fact that he was declared innocent. At a prayer breakfast, he declared war upon his enemies. At a prayer breakfast. Think about what Jesus says. Love your enemies. Turn your cheek. If they slap you once, slap again. If they take your cloak, give them your coat as well. See somebody pretending to be pro-life, pretending to be a Christian, and then actually going against everything that Jesus says was quite frightening. Put in mind even almost of the Antichrist, who pretends to be like Christ, and yet in no way is he. The gospel is always a challenge to us. We have to read the events of daily life in the light of the gospel. It includes things like welcoming refugees. It includes things like being open to those of different faiths, different colour. It includes being welcoming to everybody who comes into the church, not making fun, not saying you don't deserve to be here, as some do. Rather, we've got to be as embracing and welcoming as possible. Not because we necessarily agree with everybody's choices, but because they have to encounter Christ. In encountering Christ, he will change them. It's not our job to change people. That is the Holy Spirit and Christ's job. So let us always listen for the voice of Christ but let us always be the face of Christ, the light of the world and the salt of the earth.